Okay, as discussed in the session, the most important thing for trustees is to understand what their objectives are for the transaction. So, for example, on a buyout, that's probably conducive to a trustee objective of winding up the scheme. And the intention there is to transfer all the member liabilities over to an insurance company, and under the buyout transaction, members' benefits would be secured directly under policies in their own names with that insurance company. And in a wind-up of a scheme, that means then the scheme, if you buy out all of the member liabilities, that means the scheme can be wound up. With a buy-in, that's more conducive to a trustee objective of de-risking a scheme. And we can perhaps come on in a moment, as we did in the session, to the reasons why trustees might go for buy-ins and buyouts. But within a buy-in transaction, the policy is held by the trustees. Member liabilities aren't actually handed over to the insurance company, albeit that their benefits are. There is a policy which insures those liabilities for the benefit of the trustees. So I think the key thing there is the trustees understanding their objective as to whether it's buy out at one end of the spectrum or buy in at the other. And then further within a buy-in context, there are different types of buy-ins that you might look at. And there have been some transactions recently where the trustees have put in place a single transaction that's then done in stages. So that allows trustees to effectively take bite-sized chunks off their liabilities over time. The first issue, and probably the most important one, is money. I think all trustees would love to buy out all their members' liabilities, and indeed, if the scheme's funding was such, they would do so. For most schemes, that's a pretty tall order unless the company standing behind the scheme is going to fund the scheme's deficit up to the buyout level. So for most schemes, unless they are winding up, and unless they have an employer that has the funding or the money to fund the scheme to a full buyout level, they are most likely going to be looking at a buy-in transaction of some sort. And the reason for that is a trust law one, because although if you had a scheme that didn't have full funding, in theory it would still be possible to take a group of members and insure those members under buyout policies. But of course, if your scheme isn't well enough funded to do that for all of your members, and you just do it for some, you make the funding level even worse for those left behind. So as I say, unless the company's got money to throw at the problem, usually that forces trustees down the road of a buy-in transaction as opposed to a buyout. All risks buyouts have started to develop quite recently. They're a reasonably new phenomenon, with some, but not all, insurers offering that as a product. The interesting thing about an all risks transaction is it's supposed to do what the name suggests, which is insure all of the risks referable to the group of members who are being bought out or whose benefits are being bought out. The reason that's different to a conventional buyout is under a conventional, or what is called a traditional buyout, what happens there is the trustees specify very precisely what benefits are to be secured for a specific group of members, usually the scheme's pensioner members or possibly the deferred members as well. In other words, the insurer will be told, I want you to provide a pension of £1,000 a year for Mr. Bloggs. The risk for trustees on a conventional buyout is that if they've got that wrong and Mr. Bloggs should have had a pension of £1,100 a year, that's a trustee risk. The insurer has been told to provide a benefit of £1,000, and if Mr. Bloggs should have £1,100, that's an issue he has to take up with the trustees for having secured the wrong benefits for him. An all risks buyout seeks to deal with that issue by the insurer effectively taking on that risk. So if Mr. Bloggs turns up in a year's time and says, I've got the wrong benefits, I should have had a higher pension, the insurer provided Mr. Bloggs can ascertain that that was his actual legal entitlement, the insurer will take on that risk and provide that benefit to him. Now, this is a great product for trustees because it means once they've done the buyout for their intended members, that should, as the name suggests, cover all risks, and that those members shouldn't have any further claim against the trustees or the scheme. But obviously there's usually an additional premium to pay for that sort of coverage. What trustees do need to be careful about, even with all risks policies though, is understanding precisely what the all risks coverage actually means. It doesn't mean all risks of the scheme. For example, if a member was paid an incorrect transfer value 10 years ago, that's nothing to do with the insurer or the buyout transaction. So it never completely obviates the need for some form of run-off cover or indemnity cover for the trustees, but it does provide a more comprehensive level of risk reduction in relation to the buyout. Medically underwritten annuities have been around for quite a long time in the individual annuity space. That's to say, it's always been possible for an individual exercising an open market annuity option, for example, to go to an insurer, provide a lot of information about their own personal health and well-being, and obtain an annuity at a price that that takes that into account, that takes their circumstance of health into account. What's been interesting about medically underwritten annuities is their growth into the bulk annuity market. And we've started to see quite rapid growth in trustees buying bulk annuities, either on a buy-in or a buy-out basis, using exactly the same process. That's not to say that the policy that they buy at the end of this is any different to a conventional buy-in or a buy-out. It still ensures a member's pension. It's just the process used and the data used for deriving the premium or the price paid by the trustees is different under a medically underwritten annuity. So what happens in a medically underwritten bulk annuity policy is the trustees select a group of members who they want to buy an annuity for, and they will approach the insurer and request or enter into an agreement with the insurer that the insurer or a third party on the insurer's behalf can find out as much health information about those members as the insurer wishes to. So usually the members in question will be asked to fill in a questionnaire or possibly complete a telephone survey. The reason this can be attractive to trustees is the insurer can then provide accurate pricing for those members. And the way this is starting to be used by some schemes is in what's known as a top slicing way. So the trustees select a small group of the scheme's members, usually the pensioners who are paid the highest levels of pension, and they'll take those members, and a conventional annuity, the assumption is that the insurer will assume that because those members are receiving high levels of pension, they probably live in nicer areas, and on a postcode analysis they will be assumed to have quite long life expectancy. But if the insurer can find out more information about those members, it may well be that their circumstances of health aren't conducive to such an assumption of long life expectancy. So that might enable the insurer on a medically underwritten basis to provide cheaper pricing. And if trustees can secure a small number of members with a high, a sort of disproportionately high level of pension and get the most competitive pricing they can for those members, that can be quite an attractive option. As with all projects, it comes down to planning and preparation. The more planning and preparation that trustees can do for any buy-in or buy-out, the better. Ideally, trustees who are looking at a buy-in or a buy-out would be thinking about this years in advance. The scheme and the trustees, where they've gone through quite a comprehensive process of cleaning the scheme data, making sure all their information on members is bang up to date. They've got good information on how many members are married, where they live. They have a good confidence in the fact that all members are being paid the correct level of benefits, that there are no nasty legal issues lurking, like benefits that haven't been properly equalised for men and women's normal retirement dates. So as long as these issues have all been dealt with, you can go to your insurer with a nice clean set of data and a scheme that's ready to transact. Transactions can get derailed or at the very least delayed if at the point the trustees are ready, at the point the trustees approach the insurer, they then discover that there's a barber issue, for example, where men and women's normal retirement dates haven't been properly equalised. The time then taken to sort that out delays transacting with the insurer, and what might have been attractive pricing at the time can move away from you, can move away from the trustees. So the more preparation that can be done, the better. And we've started to see trustees who are looking at buy-ins as an aspiration within 2 or 3 years, starting to do the groundwork now, and that time is always well spent. Well, we're always happy to answer questions or provide information to trustees looking at these sorts of issues, and our details are on the website. The PLSA are also running a session on the 4th of February, provided by Partnership, who are a specialist annuity provider in medically underwritten policies. So if trustees are interested in medically underwritten policies, that would be a good place to start.